Welcome back to Sharpen the Point. We close out our look at the ACC plus Notre Dame, breaking down what each team is losing, returning, and bringing in for next season. Today, we take a look at a rebuilt Virginia Tech team under the guidance of James Franklin, who I really think raises the floor of that program. Should get a better ceiling, but the floor is definitely better under Franklin, given his ability and what we've seen out of him. A Wake Forest team that was game to play anybody a year ago, but they do lose their engine. Not Robbie Ashford, Damon Claiborne. That's who I'm referencing. Still don't think Robbie Ashford was very good, but we'll get more into that. And an honorary member, like we mentioned, in Notre Dame that I think is legitimately a national title contender. Starting out with what arguably, this has got to be the most painful preview for me. I despise Virginia Tech with a passion. I've made it well known. My cousin played guard at Virginia Tech. If he would have listened to me, he would have played for James Franklin at Vanderbilt. But what are we going to do? I'm also not a big Notre Dame guy, but that's a long-standing joke in my family. Quarterback-wise, Virginia Tech let me down 1 year. I didn't believe in them last year. 2 years ago, I did. Kyron Drones was absolutely atrocious for much of his time here. Ran the football extremely well. Pop Watson was a nobody. Ran off to UMass. Garrett Rangel, also awful. I think they've upgraded with Ethan Grunkenmeyer. Now, granted, this is going to be a much more pro-style offense that we've seen under the Franklin era. I'd imagine it'll operate a lot more simplistically. Grunkenmeyer is a very capable passer, comes over from Penn State with Franklin, so he kind of knows what he has. I would expect that he has a nice high floor, will not have the rushing ability or the mobility to be able to extend plays, but operates well in the pocket. He's going to make consistent throws all over the field. He's a solid prospect. We'll have to see how he progresses. Backup should be Bryce Baker, highly touted recruit, ended up going to North Carolina, never really had a chance there, but Baker does have some longer term upside if he sits behind Grunkenmeyer for that period. Running back wise, Terrion Stewart was never really the answer for my money. I didn't think he was fine at Bowling Green, but he was never going to translate to the ACC. And he didn't. He didn't really hold up. Was banged up for much of the season. I thought Marcellus Hawkins was pretty solid given what he had to work with and the offense around him. So interested to see how he's able to progress. Should not have too much competition. Bill Davis is a jag in all sense of the form. He's not even as good as Terrion Stewart. So I would expect Davis to have a slight role coming over from Louisiana Lafayette. Yes, we do not call them Louisiana. I refuse. You're not allowed to pick your own team's name. Jeff Overton, I thought he was pretty good looking as a true freshman. Looked solid in my eyes. I think that he has the capability in the long run to be a decent player, just needs to bulk up a little bit in order to ascend to the top of this depth chart once it opens up. I would expect that this running back room does get overhauled in the long run, given Franklin's prowess at bringing in running backs like we've seen at Penn State. Wide receiver wise, it was a bad room. Nobody was any good. It didn't really matter anyway because Drones wasn't going to be able to get the football to him. Aiden Green, top target. He should remain as the top outside threat. I don't think Taki Heath is going to end up being anything more than a jag. I would say it was an interesting move for Quayshawn Brown to come over from Duke. He was productive there. Obviously, Cooper Barkate, Andrell Anthony, and all of the guys that they had there were taking some shine or some pressure off of Quayshawn Brown. I do think, though, in the long run that he could end up being the highest target earner on this offense. So some combination between him and Aiden Green is likely to be the top guy in the room. But Marleon Jackson, fine player, and it'll be interesting to see what these Penn State guys are coming over with Franklin. I don't know that you could count on them being instant contributors, but guys that are probably the development line. But Quayshawn Brown, I am interested in overall. I think he fits Grunkenmeyer pretty good. Tight end wise, it it's not an explosive room. I don't think Benji Gosnell would catch some weird balls here and there. Those guys are immediately going down. Luke Reynolds is the star of the show here. He was penciled in as the next great Penn State tight end. And I think he ends up ascending to the top of this depth chart. It ends up being a utilized piece. Could end up being the second option behind like a Quayshawn Brown, maybe the third option, but he's going to be utilized in this offense. Has the chemistry already with Grunkenmeyer, so he should end up being a impact player right out the gate. Offensive line, this unit was awful a year ago. Let's be honest. Thomas Rimac, he's gone. It's going to have to grow and build off of a year ago. Now, Franklin does do a good job along the lines of scrimmage and being able to get guys going. So maybe these guys can develop a little bit. He did go out and get Logan Howland from Oklahoma, Justin Terry from Ohio State, brought in a guy named Michael Troutman with him from Penn State. So it'll be interesting to see. I think we could see some turnover along this line and try to piece some stuff together in order to improve the unit. I would imagine we do see improved play out of the offensive line, though, this season. Defensively, I think it's the biggest head scratch assistant coaching hire anywhere to bring Brent Pry in as DC. I don't kind of understand that. It's a weird one. I don't know how the fan base is going to feel about that, especially if they end up not playing great along the defensive side of the football, considering Pry's history here. But defensively, they do bring back Eljad Fall, Kamari Copeland, both solid contributors. Copeland is really solid as far as the defensive tackle goes, being able to get some pressure up the middle. Do lose some of the guys that they did have. Now, granted, they weren't generating too much, but he brings a ton with him from Penn State, which is going to be a common theme along the defensive side. Malachi Williams, solid defensive end prospect. Javion Hilson should be a solid guy out of Missouri who has some upside. It's really going to come down to how these transfers perform, given the amount of depth that's now gone, but it's probably improved from a talent perspective compared to they were a year ago. Linebacker-wise, Caleb Woodson is a big loss going to Alabama. Jaden Keller, a key contributor. Caleb Spencer is going to end up staying in his spot and being able to play a good bit. Noah Chambers, solid option, a guy that could step into a bigger role. I'll be interested to see what Keon Wiley does coming over from Penn State. Maybe Curtis Jones sees the field as a rotational piece. But I would say that the starting unit is plenty solid off of what they had a year ago, maybe a little better with Spencer, Chambers, and Wiley likely to be the guys stepping into prominent roles. Defensive back-wise, not a awful unit. Returns a lot with Brown, Murray, Flowers, and Williams occupying some spots here. And really the only notable loss being Isaiah Cash. But I feel pretty solid with the back end probably being able to grow along here. And their additions of Jaquez White from Troy, that is an instant impact player. Cam Chadwick out of UConn, instant impact player. So they did some upgrading, knowing what the struggles they had a year ago. I think those are instant upgrades. And then bringing in another Penn State guy in Kenny Wosley. So I think the depth and I think the back end is pretty solid. Overall, you still have some concerns with the offense, but you think they're probably going to play good defense. If they don't play good defense, it's Brent Pry might not have a long tenure, which is nothing new for him. All right, Wake Forest. Team played pretty solid last year in their first year under the new coaching staff. Jake Dickert coming over from Washington State. Robbie Ashford was something He had big games and bad games. That's nothing new. I would say they upgraded on with Gio Lopez. I'm a Gio Lopez truther. I think he's a better player than we saw at UNC. Uh, he was very good at South Alabama in spurts here and there. Personally, I would have thought the better fit was Alonzo Barnett. I thought he fit the system a little bit better than Gio Lopez does. Don't know the inner workings of that. Haven't delved into it, but I personally thought coming in the offseason that Alonzo Barnett would have fit the Dickert system very well. Lopez is a good fit, not a great fit compared to Barnett. The biggest concern with Lopez is can he stay on the field? He plays big, but he gets hurt too much. So if he can stay healthy, I really like the fit and I like the way that he'll play. He needs to stay healthy because behind him is a lot of problems. If he goes down, it's going to get pretty interesting. Now, they did do a good job in the running back room, adding some pieces that have capability. Damon Claiborne being gone removes basically their best offensive weapon. He was banged up a little bit last year, or else he would have had 1,300 yards easily on the ground. Ty Clark, I thought, played extremely well and should step right into that number one role. They do have some solid backups that they added. KD Daniels has a ton of talent and capability in the backfield. So pairing him with Clark, he should replace the Clark role as the kind of spell guy, with Clark taking on the majority of the work. And then Sawyer Sadell, I think, is more of a gadget player coming out of North Dakota. A little light in the britches at 165, but has some explosiveness. So I would say you're looking at Clark as the one taking over the Claiborne spot, Daniels the two taking the Clark spot, and then Sadell kind of getting mop up duty with a little bit of pass catching mixed and matched here and there. Wide receiver wise, big changeover in the room. I wasn't a huge fan of a lot of these guys except for Micah Mays. Micah Mays was a guy that has a ton of talent. I think he'll fit in at Florida. I don't know how much of a role he ends up having, but big talent there. Kind of surprising the lack of target volume and catches that he had a year ago. Granted, we know Robbie Ashford can't really hit the broadside of a barn. Carlos Hernandez, though, coming over with the coaching staff, had a solid year in all forms. He's not a high ADOT guy, but he's able to kind of create yardage after the catch. I think he continues in the number one role. And Antonio Meeks has some talent, but hasn't really lived up to it. He likely sees a role. Chase Tyler is probably more of a developmental player. And then Wandame Davis, also depth piece, not necessarily a star. So outside of Hernandez, I do have concerns as to what else we're working with and how they're going to be able to perform outside of him. I think Hernandez is in for a good season, probably closer to 100 targets, maybe 90. I would say 60 catches, depending on the health of Lopez. But this is a run-based team for the most part, and we'll have to kind of wait and see how that ends up operating out. Tight end, not really utilized in this system. Limited amount of targets to go around. Don't particularly worry too much about it. Landon Morris, likely the guy who ends up stepping into a role paired with Cameron Johnson, but they're not utilized in this system. Offensive line wise, 3 graduates, but the big name is Melvin Siani going over to Texas. That is the one that hurts the most. Clinton Richards is going to have to hold some stuff down. Maybe George Stay ends up getting a secondary role here. The 2 tackles are the big concern right now. They did go out and shore up the interior portion of this offensive line with Ryan Berger at Oregon State. John Onegin from Bucknell is going to provide some good depth. He started 35 games at Bucknell. All of them have really come at center. He did have a left tackle start at Bucknell, though, so potentially could kick out. I don't think we end up seeing that, though, more than likely. I think it's going to end up having to be one of the guys from the depth that ends up taking that that tackle spot. But tackle is going to be the big weakness on this offense. They're going to need good line play in order to move the football, given the lack of weaponry on the outside and the running back depth that they do have. So they're going to need to lean into those guys. But it could be a situation where the running backs catch just a crazy amount of passes. Defensively, this was a very good unit. A little bit of a surprise given the Dickert background. So I think of it more of as an offensive minded coaching staff. But man, this defense was stout. And it brings back a good bit along this defensive line. Langston Hardy being the star of the show, coming off the edge, just getting massive pass rush. Gabe Kirchie, Dallas Afalayev, Jaden Loving. I mean, these guys, I think Loving probably graduated, but I'm not 100% certain on that one. It's potentially he could still be there. But I mean, bringing back all they did and then adding a DJ Johnson out of New Hampshire, who had a really solid year for the Wildcats there. He's a guy that has some upside to be able to get after the passer. Really like this defensive line unit and the depth that it has. So I think it's capable of repeating last season, if not being slightly improved along the defensive line, which gives them a great baseline to be able to work from. Aiden Hall, again, going to be the engine in the middle of this defense. Do lose his counterparts in Dylan Hazen and Quincy Bryant, but Frank Cusano got plenty of reps a year ago. I'd imagine he steps into a position next to Hall. And then Shakai Woods, another great addition out of Middle Tennessee, played well for the Blue Raiders. I would expect that he ends up replacing one of the two backers, with Cusano getting a bigger role here in this defense. Secondary was stout as well. Do lose both corners in Ladarius Webb Jr., Karan Prunty, Nick Anderson at free safety, all graduating. Did a nice job, though, in the portal and still brought back enough to be able to be plenty competitive. Brian Blades is immediately slotting in as the number one corner. Out of FIU, we remember his dad at Miami, his uncle at Miami. He's a talented kid. He's a guy that it was one of the reasons I bought into the FIU team a year ago. Played very well. I would say he slots in immediately. I think Bernard Causey from Georgia State, solid corner, not great, but he'll be in a bit of a competition with your Trayvon Wests of the world, and possibly be able to push for playing time. I think he's likely to be in the mix. And then Vincent Ferenzi, solid safety pickup out of Dayton. Played pretty well. A big safety, 6'4", 220. Maybe a guy that ends up transitioning to a linebacker role, but he's more of a hybrid. So I think he's a guy that can push into the box and play a very big role as far as run stopping / cover. Will his speed translate? Somewhat of a question mark. But I think his capability to react will be able to play a big role for this defense overall. Big safety, man. Love a big safety. So I think he's a useful piece, big time. I think this defense is going to be very good once again. I do worry about the offensive line. That's my main concern. Can Gio Lopez stay healthy? If Lopez stays healthy and the offensive line kind of works out, I think this is a very good, solid upper half team. But it's going to have to win some defensive battles. I think it's going to struggle to score points. It's got to be designed points that come out of there. So those are going to be some lower scoring games. Not a team that I'm going to go heavily after early in the season necessarily until I kind of see. I'm open to playing some Hernandez and playing some Ty Clark early in the year. But Gio Lopez is going to kind of be a wait and see. And I want to see how that offensive line develops and gels together. All right. We know you're all here for this. It's Notre Dame. And yes, I lost more money on betting against Notre Dame last year. And actually more money betting on Notre Dame because I bet against them heavy against Miami. than I did probably any team. CJ Carr is a star. He's a guy that will be a top 10 pick in the draft in 2 years. He's got a great head on his shoulders, throws the football well. He's got decent mobility, underrated mobility for my money. I correctly projected that he would start over Kenny Minchie. Minchie, I think, going to have a very strong year under Will Stein at Kentucky. Waxed poetic about him in the Kentucky discussion. Carr is going to be very, very good. I am almost hesitant. I think I'm just going to say it. I think he's probably better than Julian's saying. Um, is he arch? It's close. I think Carr might be one of the best pro style, might be the best pro style quarterback in college football right now. And we just kind of saw a glimpse. It was our first look at him. A kid's a superstar. I'm bought in. I think the market's bought in, and he's going to need to be pretty good given the losses in the running back room with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price both being first round picks. They were both stars. Love extremely good. I'm not as big on Price as I was, nearly as close to Love. I still think Aeneas Williams is a very, very talented player, just did not get the reps because of what's in front of him. He should immediately ascend to the top of the depth chart. The question is, who gets the run behind him? Nolan James probably gets the first shot, but I would not be surprised if one of the freshman recruits gets in there and starts taking work. I would not be surprised because that you can hit the ground running at the running back spot. I know we're going to think that early on they're probably going to be heavier leaning to Williams, but I think one of these guys is going to emerge. I'm going to refuse to play a James, an Osborne, or a Walton early. I will play Williams early, but I think he probably comes in underpriced early in the season. So I'm going to be interested in playing a lot of Aeneas Williams early in the year, more than likely. Very good out of the backfield, too. Very good catching passes out of the backfield. So he's going to be utilized. But this thing might be a little more pass heavy to start the year than we had seen a year before. Wide receiver wise, Will Pauling is a nothing loss for me. He did catch some touchdowns a year ago, just never really recovered from the Wisconsin situation. Caught a ton of balls there 1 year, but then other than that, that's the extent of what we had. I was a big Malachi Fields guy. I thought he was a little underutilized in this offense a year ago. Played better than he's going to get credit for. Made some very big catches during the season. I'm not a Jordan Faison guy. Kill me for that. Whatever. I think he's a rotational wide receiver and not a star wide receiver. He'll work in. He'll be on the field. He'll probably play fairly well. I think it comes down to Jaden Greathouse has a ton of talent and a lot of capability. He might be able to ascend to the number one spot. But there's a lot behind him to buy into. You got a Micah Gilbert and a Cam Williams who have had a year, had some time in the system, maybe could grow into something. The two Ohio State transfers are extremely interesting. I would somewhat be surprised if they did not start out of the gate. Quincy Porter, solid player. Mylan Graham got a good amount of run with Ohio State when those guys were banged up. So did Porter. They didn't do a ton, but we've kind of seen this story play out before with Ohio State guys transferring and producing outside of Noah Rogers. I'm not a Noah Rogers guy. It's worked out. I've just kind of said I'm not buying the talent. But Graham and Porter have that capability similarly to those guys that have transferred out that played well to jump straight into this situation with a great quarterback, to play next to a great house, to play with a Faison mixing in. If Faison ends up being the one, I'm going to be mid-season before I buy into it. So I'm going to probably end up missing out on that. I'll buy into one of the Ohio State guys. I'll buy into Great House um, being a guy. I'm tempted to say Porter ends up being the guy, but I'm just, that's me delivering priors. Tight end, highly utilized in this system. I thought Eli Raridan did a heck of a job. I played him a little last year. He's a guy that I would buy into. And I think they're sorely going to miss him. He didn't catch touchdowns necessarily, but he was heavily utilized to move the chains, and he was a good safety blanket. Ian Premer is likely to be the long-term answer here. I'll be curious to see who emerges as the starter. Maybe it's the Jack Larson who ends up getting that role right out the gate. Uh, it's highly unlikely you see a freshman tight end produce right away. So I'd imagine we're going to see a guy that's been in the system like a Jack Larson be more of the receiving option, maybe a Cooper Flanagan. You never know. So it's interesting to see who emerges. I want to keep an eye on that because that is a utilized position in this offense, even though they do have plenty of weapons on the outside. Offensive line, this thing's in great shape. They've utilized plenty of these guys, so I'm not concerned about replacing them. You lose an Emil Wagner, a solid player, but Matty Augustine, Will Black, either very capable of stepping straight in and playing. Billy Schroth at the left guard spot, gone. Sullivan Absher, Ashton Craig, all plenty capable. Charles Jagasaw, if he can be healthy, Jagasaw could step right into anything and play. So they're just recruiting extremely well. And this is a deep unit. I have zero concerns of this offensive line performing massively. I think out the gate, they probably throw the football a little more than they did a year ago early on when they were getting Carr's feet wet. I thought if they threw the football more in that Miami game, they win it. That was the kind of the disappointment, in my opinion, that they didn't. They played weird. I don't understand why Jeremiah Love wasn't getting more carries early in the game, more touches in that particular game. I'm still ranting about it because I remember how much money I lost on that game. But nonetheless, I think this offensive line is unreal good. One of the better units in the country, more than likely. And they're going to be able to run the football. They're going to buy in. I think they're going to throw the football early in the season. Got plenty of weapons on the outside, plenty of depth at the tight end position for somebody to emerge. It's just all cylinders should click with this offense. It's going to be a dang good offense. And this defense was absolutely filthy a year ago. Boubacar Traore is a difference maker when he's healthy. He needs to be healthy because the combination of him and Bryce Young is nasty coming off the edge. Now, the defensive tackle depth is my one concern because Hennish and Hughes are going to have to step into big roles and fill in for like a Jason Anya and a Jared Dawson. They kind of lose that top end depth, and they're going to have to replace that. Now, they did go out and recruit well, getting a Francis Brew from Pitt that's going to help with that interior. Tione Gray from Oregon could help with that interior. I'm interested to see what Keon Keeley can do coming over from Alabama as an extra pass rusher. I think they need him to be more of insurance and kind of a replacement for a Jordan Botello. He's going to need to be more insurance as that rusher for Traore, trying to keep him healthy and splitting some time with him. If Keeley can do that, that amplifies this thing to the nth degree here. Linebacker wise, bring back everybody. I just absolutely beautiful depth. I'm going to touch on two guys that I need to talk about. Number one, I have to mention obligatorily my former boss's son. I remember when he was a wee little lad, Jaden Osbury. Shout out to Verge. That kid is long and he can play. He can move. He's going to be a rotational piece in the system, no doubt about it. Get some good edge work out of him. And I want to see what the development curve is, I have to mention him because he's Thomas Davis Jr. We know what his dad was. If that kid can be three-quarters of his dad, he's gonna be unbelievably good. Because Thomas Davis is a freak, and I wanna see this kid. So I'm interested in him, long term. Obviously, he's gonna be able to sit and learn, probably get some mop-up duty here and there, out the gate, but the top end of this thing is just absolutely filthy with Bowen, Villamuasa, Jaden Osbury, Jalen Sneed. Like, these are guys that have played a ton of games, and they are really good at linebacker, really good at defensive line, especially on the front with the starters. And then you look at the depth of this defense. It's absolutely stacked with Christian Gray, Leonard Moore, Tay Johnson, Adon Schuler. Like, that is filthy. And they recruit so well on this side of the football. Like, yeah, they're gonna churn the bottom third of the roster, but then you're replacing them with like a Jaden Sanders as a depth piece, a GJ McKinney as a depth piece. Like, these are all you bring in a Corey Adams who can learn for a year, bring in a Joey O'Brien who can learn behind some of these superstars. This is an absolutely filthy unit. Like, this whole defense rival Texas and Notre Dame, two of the best defenses in the country. And man, how much fun. I'm just going to wrap it with this. How much fun would it be to get a national title game with those two defenses, Texas, Notre Dame? You get CJ Carr, Lloyd Carr's grandson, and Arch Manning. We all know the Manning family. That would be one heck of a fun storyline leading into a national title game.